Good morning. We continue our review, conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, my essay that I wrote with an attempt to understand how most likely the Rebbe Rashab would have continued writing and answering the questions and the ideas and themes he did not finish, at least to our eyes. So we are on page 5 of that essay, which we've now entered into the Mitteler Rebbe's explanation. And just to sum it up, let me pull it up. If you want to follow this text, right now it's a PDF file on the Ayin Beis group, courtesy of our dear friend Rabbi Yitzchok. And we will post it up on our website on ayinbeis.com. We haven't done it yet. So, well worth reading, where I lay out, firstly, the case of the topics and questions that were not answered, and then a summary of Ayin Beis, of the overall Ayin Beis, leading all the way till the end. And then we continue from the end where the Mitteler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe, the Maimer Hamagbihi continue the discussion. Namely, that in Ayin Beis, he stops at the point about the contemplation, 11 pages, I should say, of discussing the contemplation of Hashem Echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is the neshama contemplating on the divine unity, and in 3 levels: Yichud Tata, Yichud Ilah, and the Yichud of both Yichudim. And that's where he ends in Ayin Beis. In the Maimer Hamagbihi of the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, and I'm doing the Mitteler because the Mitteler Rebbe is more elaborate, and the Rebbe Rashab is quoting more from him, from the Mitteler Rebbe, continues. So now that we know these 3 levels of Yichud, this in turn impacts the Nefesh HaBamis. That's what we learned yesterday. And I'll just go over some of the language, and then we'll continue. So it's on page 5 of this summary, or this essay, I should say, which is actually divided into 7 chapters. So we're all now still in chapter 1 of this essay. So let's read the language just that after the Hemshech it finishes. Now comes the Maimer Hamagbihi and continues. So it's very obvious that the Rebbe Rashab would have continued at least in that vein, perhaps with some additions. We don't know what he would have written, how much he would have elaborated, he would have just quoted the Mitteler Rebbe. I mean, from the past, what he's done in the past, meaning in earlier pages, he basically quotes the Mitteler Rebbe and adds explanation. So most likely that would have been the case here too. So the Rebbe, so now I'm reading in the middle of page 5 of this summary. It says, Metam zeh, says the Mitteler Rebbe, Hu sha'amar acher Shema Yisrael, for this reason, meaning for the reason that we're contemplating on Hashem Echad, which in turn creates a consciousness of the divine in a person's life, in the neshama's life. So that will now understand the continuation, why we say V'ahavta after Shema. Because Shema is not, the contemplation part leads to awakening and inspiring and a stimulation, an arousal of the emotion called love of God. Because when you appreciate God's unity in your life, if you're busy with your own activities and you're not focusing on Hashem, so you're not going to obviously have a love for God. You may have one sporadically, but not through any deliberate effort. But when you're contemplating, and remember earlier we also learned Hamayich be'echad. He said it was an extended contemplation, Mayrich. That was a big part of the discussion a number of pages back. So when a person does that, that means they're divine conscious now. And in the 3 levels of the Yichud, so now we understand what comes afterwards. The Hainu Achash Yes B'Koich HaSaga de Bina. This is the Mitteler Rebbe's language. After we have, with the power of the Hasaga of the comprehension of Bina, in the mind and in the heart, in the neshama, so now we lahakir ulahavin kol zeh b'amitis achdus pshuta, to recognize, discern, and understand the true nature, the true divine unity that permeates and saturates existence, b'atzmas halakus, and this also affects not just how halakus is before the tzimtzum or before ishtalshlus, gam acher ishtalshlus, the ein shinu lefon of klal, because havaya lekeinu is mamish one, and there's no mosach hamaster, there's no partition. He uses mosach hamaster. The Rebbe Rashab used parsa and tzimtzum. Im kein mizeh hatam atzmai. And for this very reason, you can then arrive, this Eira Seichel, Asaga, and the Nefesh Elikis, due to its connection now, it's connecting Hashem Echad with Hashem Echad, the divine unity, that in turn will affect Gam B'Seichel Anushi, the Nefesh Abamis. That will affect also the human intelligence of the animal soul, even though its nature is the exact opposite on its own. It's lahasi called geshem v'nifred. It's preoccupied with understanding the material world and everything that's separate from God as a separate, independent identity. B'kol mokim, through the light, through the energy of this divine comprehension that we have gone through in Hashem in Shema Yisrael. Being that it comes from higher than the system, the very system where the Nefesh Abamis dwells, so it has the power also to transform the crass darkness of the animal soul, that is the human intelligence and the very physical heart of flesh, natural heart of the animal soul, Yaskim Gamhu v'yeda la'emes. It too will agree and acknowledge v'yeda like Heda on the truth of this divine unity, which is the true nature of existence. Like we see that when it radiates this truth from the Nefesh Elikis, b'seichel v'das Eliki, yut fezeh la'emes gomer gam b'seichel anushi. This would also be grasped and understood, also by Seichel Anushi of the animal soul, sheyechayev, that will compel it, compelling argument, that even darkness does not conceal before him. So think of it like the animal soul purely on its own is busy with its own interests. But let's go, before we get to the divine contemplation, you could train an animal soul to go to school and get educated and become a master, whether in physics or mathematics or science or law or other schools of thought, other subjects. Why? Because the Nefesh Abamis does appreciate intelligence and does appreciate a logical system and wants to have a life that's successful. And there's a certain natural curiosity even in human intelligence. Now, if you take it a step further, Shema Yisrael introduces divine intelligence and divine consciousness. So here too, the animal soul can and is receptive to understanding a logical argument. When you make the case, for example, that all of existence is just a surface level, and within it lies subatomic particles and deeper spiritual particles, divine energy, Yichud Tata. We'll soon discuss the other levels, but basically that the divine is the real vivifying energy that creates all of existence and sustains it. Animal soul can appreciate that. And that's what he's saying, and will acknowledge it, and will accept that truth. That's where we stopped. So I'm going to continue now from there. Basically, it's the middle of page 5. Page 5, paragraph 1, 2, 3, middle of paragraph 3 in page 5. So I'm going to continue from where I just stopped. Let's go on. He says like this now. So first I want to make a point before we continue. If you may recall, and he's going to cite it in a few minutes, says in the next few lines, that when he discussed an Ayin Beis at length, a lot more than the Mitteler Rebbe explains, the concept of Yesh Ma'ayin, which was the basis of the whole contemplation, that it's not Yesh Miyesh, he made 2 points, two key points. One was that God is beyond existence altogether. That's why he can create yesh ma'ayin. It's not yesh miyesh. Yesh miyesh has something commensurate between them. If you remember, he said two differences between yesh miyesh and yesh ma'ayin. One is that there's something in common between the two, and the second that the ilah, the olol, the effect impacts the cause. Whereas by God, being that it's so distant, infinitely distant, he's not affected. Lo shanisi. He's immutable. It's like only a reflection. Those are two differences, which is all part of the contemplation of understanding divine unity. Like the example he gave, sunlight. It's not affected by what it shines on. With all the distinctions, I'm not going into all the details right now. So one part of this is that God is beyond existence altogether. In a sense, like Yichud Elah. But interesting, taking Einstein's, I think it's Einstein's expression, that you cannot correct a problem from the very system that created the problem. The Nefesh Habamis is definitely affected by the Tzimtzum. And that's why it indeed has an independent consciousness, which can lead it, like we said, to Yetzer Hara, to even evil. Because it's not sensing on its own the divine creator. I'm on my own. And what do people do when they're on their own, when they don't feel accountable, they don't feel that they are part of a bigger plan? They follow their own agenda. And that is often self-interest that can lead to who knows what. How do you check that? You check it by contemplation and by moyach shalat alalev, self-control. But primarily the nefesh alikis is the counter voice that says that's not the purpose of life. Nefesh habamis can respond to that. But what are you really doing? If you were trying to repair or transform the animal soul from the same world where the animal soul dwells, at best you may be able to discipline it a bit, also in the name of self-interest. But if you want transformation, v'ahavtas Hashem lekecha, and the nefesh elikis is now accessing divine levels that are beyond existence, in a way you have the power now to rewire the animal soul because you're going outside of the system. So then when you bring that energy into the system, you actually can do a transformation. He alluded to that briefly. I think he's going to say it more at length. I'm not sure. We'll see. But regardless, is definitely correct. When he said before, he said, what the language he used was, from the nefesh elikis, so a few lines before, he said, when the nefesh elikis connects to atzmus, to its root b'Hashem havaya b'teira mitzvahs, that's what caught my attention. Being that you're coming from a level that's beyond the shtalshus, beyond structure, so then you have the power now to rewire the structure. If you're in the structure itself, it's almost impossible to do that, if at all. So that's one point. On the other hand, if you remember, he said by yesh ma'ayin, not just the Yichud Elah, that would only refer to the divine beyond existence, but God also created another track, Mamala Kalam, the divine that manifests and relates to existence. Why? Because if you want to change something, you can't do it from a distance. The first step that I just pointed out gives you the power to transform, but now you have to apply yourself. And you have to apply yourself. The nefesh elikis has to be mislabish and manifest in the nefesh habamis in a pneumistic way, to the point that the seichel of the nefesh elikis, the seichel of nefesh habamis become literally one. So you don't have two intelligence, you have one mind, with the nefesh elikis and nefesh habamis both involved, both interwoven. Like we learned earlier, that's where the koyach hamafil lasis, only God could create such a joining. So on one hand, you have a voice coming from outside of existence. On the other hand, you have a voice coming within existence that the nefesh habamis can relate to. You're speaking the language of the nefesh habamis. You're not just ordering it. It's not just a command coming from the engine room, from beyond existence, saying, we want to change you. The nefesh habamis is relating to it. So you have to also say that the divine energy is relating to the nefesh habamis, is bislapshus. And these two factors is ultimately what has the power to transform the nefesh habamis. So again, one, he doesn't say it explicitly yet, but it sounds like Yichud Elah is more the energy of bittul. that comes from outside the system, that all of existence is completely nullified in its presence. And then there's the Yichud Tata, the divine within existence that the Nefesh Habamis can relate to. And when you combine those two together, it's a potent combination that actually has the power to transform. Remember, the question was, all the different nuschayos we learned, whether it's the Rebbe Rashab's expression or the Alter Rebbe or the Mitteler Rebbe, the bottom line question is, the Nefesh Habamis is a yesh. It's the diametric opposite of the Nefesh Elikis. How could you change that? So this is coming now to explain that, because the Nefesh Elikis is introducing not just a contemplation of understanding godliness, but it's actually introducing that energy. So it's not just that we're thinking about Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata, we're actually drawing it down. So that power is allowing the Nefesh Elikis to influence Nefesh Habamis. So there's a few things at work here. The Nefesh Habamis is understanding it, obviously, which is critical. Nefesh Habamis is understanding, and it makes sense, like he says, it's makir. It recognizes the truth, that the divine is the true reality, and existence is only its product. In other words, the artist, the hand inside the glove, not the glove as an end in itself, but it's also invoking and drawing down energy that has the power to change existence and the power to enter and permeate and penetrate existence. So that's just a short introduction to the next few lines that we're going to read and what we just read. So let's read inside, and then, so he says like this.
But the second, the Memale Kol Almin that you said, sounds like this is a Nefesh Habahamis Seichel, but it's not, according to the explanation.
I didn't say that at all.
Now.
Where did you hear me say that? I didn't say it. It's Elikus, Bislapshus in existence that the Nefesh Habamis can relate to. That's what I said.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so reading now, it goes like this. For who? This aspect that we see that the Seichel Anushi of the Nefesh Habamis, it's mechayev, sheyechayev amitis hadover, uhu metamanal, and this is for the above mentioned reason. So he's bringing back ideas that he's discussed earlier, the Mitteler Rebbe. She'ein ha'er eliki bo b'kira v'erech av b'ishtalshlus the koyach ha'poel b'nifel el hu ma'ayin mamish liyesh be'ein shinui klal kamoy koydem shenivra elam. So what do we learn? Remember that even when Elikus comes into Seder Ishtalshlus and manifests like Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia, it still retains its divine so-called apartness. Like he says, it doesn't come b'kiruv ha'erech. It comes close in the sense that it's kiruv ha'ayin el hayesh, but they're still very different entities, and it retains its immutable nature. Not just lifnei tzimtzum and lifnei ishtalshlus, but also la'achrei ishtalshlus and la'achrei tzimtzum, in the language we used earlier in Ayin Beis. So even when the koyach hapoel benifel, when the very divine energy manifests, the power of the producer enters into the product. Because remember, God is saying Yehi Oyer. He's not standing in an aloof, distant place and just saying, let there be a creation. He's actually saying the words, B'dvar Hashem Shemayim Nas Asarim Amaris Nivra Elam. So it's a koyach hapoel benifel, just like the example being, just like a potter is holding the pot in his hand as he's shaping it. Obviously, God is not defined by that, but He chose to manifest that way. But even when He does, it's still ma'ayin mamish liyesh without any shinui. Like if you remember from the Abrah's point of view, Yichud Tata and Yichud Elah are one and the same, because the tzimtzum does not conceal. So it's kamei kakodim shenivra elam. Al kain yipol b'chinas bitl b'mitzias v'asoge sa'emes b'elikus av b'tzimtzum ha'achrin the nega. So since the divine energy that comes after the tzimtzum, that the Nefesh Habamis can relate to, is retaining its immutable divine aspect that is not compromised at all, that remains without shinui, like we said, immutable. Even as the energy comes into a world of shinui, it retains that. So he's saying, so therefore the bittul, b'mitzias, that energy contains, will affect that bittul of mitzias that energy contains, and the asogas ha'emes, be'elikus, this comprehension of the truth. What's the truth? That even b'tzimtzum ha'achron, the nega, even in the lowest symptom of nega, of klippas nega, where the divine is concealed, shehem behester l'kuz betachlis, b'seichel anushi umidas hativim, where there the divine energy is utterly concealed in the seichel and the human intelligence and the natural midas and impulses of the animal soul. So I'm going to say the end of the sentence, that even there you now have a connection through this bonus and nefesh alikis in the alikus, in the yichud amitis, that will affect the animal soul. But he continues to elaborate on the concealment. V'haraya lezeh. And what's the proof for this? Shagam u'miseh elam, even the nations of the world, kodolei elaka delakaya. Even when they worship their gods, they still call God the God of gods. So they're recognizing, they don't replace God, they just add more memutzoyim, more interfaces, which is a problem, because there's only one God. But even they call it Elikad Elikaya, Uksiv Milo Yore Melech HaGoyim, Uksiv Halu as Hashem Kol Goyim Ukai Gavna. So you see here, he's actually bringing the non-Jews. We said we would discuss it, but he's bringing it here specifically. So even they acknowledge that. V'zeu shekosav, and this is what it says, V'yadaita hayem kavayu elikim, b'shamayim imal b'yechudei elah, ala oretz mitochas b'klippas nega, einaid. So he's bringing the actual posuk, which is such a foundation for Ayin Beis. Dahainu, b'shneim ein oid b'shava metamanal. So here he's interpreting the ein oid is equal in both of them, both in Yechudei Elah, Shemayim Emal, and the Oretz Metachas, even after the Tzimtzum, even as it comes into Klippa, but he called it Tzimtzum Ha'achron in the Nega. Al Kain, not sure what the next word is, I have to check in the source. I think it probably says Al Kain Leimer, that's why it says, Ki Chashecha Ka'era, for him, dark and light are like one, V'gam Cheshech Le'yachshech, like he brought before, and darkness doesn't conceal. And all this is being transmitted to the animal soul and affecting it. The dal lemavin. It's an expression the Mitteler Rebbe uses often. Enough for the discerning ones, enough for those that understand. In other words, he doesn't need to elaborate more. He doesn't need to elaborate more. So this is a parenthesis that began, what I began today learning. It goes all the way, it's around the 7-line parentheses. All coming to further explain why the bittul, this higher bittul, affects the nefesh habamis. And he's bringing proof, because u'miseh elam are definitely not nefesh alikis, and yet they're also affected. They also can recognize God, like he just brought. So, that ends this paragraph. Let me stop if anybody has any questions.
By referring to the other, the Goyim, the other Ummos Ha'olam, and
the nations of the world, yes.
Yeah, right. And how they recognize the Eberster, but only as whatever he said, the God of gods.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to find what he said with that contraction. That's why I don't have your text in front of me in a moment. But anyways, the question is, he means to say, just in layman's terms, that the Christians, for example, have their Yashke, and the Catholics even added another element. Whatever, I don't need to go into the details. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. And the Muslims have their prophet, but both religions recognize the ultimate one God. Is that essentially what he's referring to? Because there's Hindus, and although Hindus have some,
he's not going into. He's referring to a Maimer Chazal that says, he's not saying which nations. He's just saying that the nations, even those that did have some form of, you could say, idols or other deities, or it refers to God as the God of all gods, meaning they didn't replace God. They just added intermediaries. He's not describing here Christianity or Islam per se. First of all, Islam is complete monotheism according to the Rambam, and we hold that. So he's just speaking the idea, the concept that even someone who doesn't have a nefesh alikis, meaning even like the nefesh abam, klipas nega, there too can have the awareness of God. He's not going into much detail here. I said I would discuss it later in more detail. That's all he's bringing. He says as a raya. He wants to say v'raya lezeh, a raya that even after the tzimtzum, there is an awareness of godliness. He brings that as a proof. That's all he's saying here.
I see. By the way, I did check the original mimer, and the reason why you couldn't figure out that contraction is because it's a typo. The lamed mem should be kuf mem. Kuf mem yud.
Kamosha Kosov, probably Kamosha Kosov, yeah.
No, it's a kuf. It's a kuf mem. Kuf mem yud. Kuf.
Oh, kamei. Okay,
yeah.
kamei.
Yeah.
Before him. Okay, I have to correct that. Yeah, kamei. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Alkain kamei kachashech. Before him, darkness is like light. Okay. Any other questions? So let's continue on. V'zehu v'hafta b'chol levavcha, the next paragraph. Mind you, this is all the language of the Mitteler Rebbe. It's not my language. This is all quotes, direct quote from the Mitteler Rebbe.
So according to this, the nefesh abahamis is pashut because it understands, getting some understanding of the
I just elaborate.
godly.
It's more than just understanding. It's also affected by the energy that's being introduced. Yeah.
I understand, but it has nothing to do with a physical understanding, say energy.
Why not? Why not? You're using examples from science or nature, or when we speak from Keiches HaNefesh, it's not a faith-based concept. There's a logic behind it, and the human brain can understand that the divine energy is the energy that energizes. Just like we understand that subatomic particles and atoms and molecules are the building blocks of existence. It's all part of why not. All of Chassidus is b'psari ech zelekah. From my flesh, we bring many examples from our flesh, from our being. Manashama mamalas aguf kacha kodesh baruch hu mamalas elam. It's all part of Seichel Anushi, is being introduced and understanding and appreciating. That's really what Chassidus Chabad is all about.
So that means that the Nefesh Abahamis is still using the selfish thing, but understands that
I don't know what
the
selfish
reason,
simply means. I don't know, but the word selfish is a broad word. The Nefesh Abahamis on its own uses its mind to make money, to survive, to hunt, to feed, to breed, to build a glory, etc. Here, it's the Shema. Just be very practical. Shema Yisrael introduces into the person's life another perspective. It's called divine consciousness. Hashem Echad. Nefesh Abahamis is part of the process. It's beginning to appreciate that. As it appreciates it, it's affected by it to the point. V'haftas Hashem Elokecha. That's not selfish. Okay, you say it has ulterior motives. Maybe you could say it has ulterior motives. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it has partially.
Yeah,
it's all part of the process of a human being coming to. I just think of it very practical. All of us. Every time you do something the whole you, is eating a meal, l'shem shamayim, your nefesh abahamis is involved, and it understands it's the right thing to do.
So there is a mile in that the Rav voice, the koyach shoyer, the nefesh abahamis.
Yeah, but so we learned earlier in Ayin Beis that the shemen of the animal soul increases the flame of the nefesh alikis. He said yisunei menacheshach. So it does.
Right.
So that's another point. That's not what he's saying here, however. Okay. V'zehu v'hafta b'chol levavcha And this is the meaning. V'hafta b'chol levavcha. What is levavcha? The Gemara says, b'shnei yitzarecha. Afilu b'yetzer hara sheb'chol hasmali. Even in the yetzer hara on the left side of the heart. Shesham b'chinas ruach ha'behema hayeredes lamata. That's where, like he says in Tanya chapter 9, that where does the animal soul dwell? Where is its domain? In the left side of the heart. The ruach ha'behema, the spirit of the animal, which is the pasuk kehelas that we have reread and discussed earlier in Ayin Beis, and also in the Mitteler Rebbe's Maimer. Where is the ruach ha'behema, the spirit, the breath of the behema, and its whole physiology is yeredes lamata begashmi is dafka. The nefesh habamis on its own looks downward for the grass or at its young. It looks for its survival. Shu hepech v'neged ruach ha'adam the nefesh halikis. On its own is the diametric opposite of the ruach ha'adam, of the breath of man that walks upright. She'ela l'mayla, that doesn't go down, goes up. It looks up to Hashem. Su mare menechem rumi bara ela, lahakir ba'achdus pshuta, to recognize the divine, the seamless divine unity. And furthermore, that also impacts v'gam be'ishtalshlus ha'elamus. The Nefesh Halikis understands, the Ruach HaAdam, that even when it goes into ishtalshlus ha'elam, eich shehu ma'ayin liyesh dafke, how even that is still ma'ayin liyesh, it's not lost its ayin integrity of the divine. So that's the distinction between them. And nevertheless, achgam ruach habehema, the tiva lated lamata. However, the effect of ahaftas Hashem elakacha b'chol vavcha through Shema Hashem echad is such that also the ruach habehema, whose natural nature is to go downward, meaning to deal with its own needs and survival, tala l'mayla. Instead, it too will be elevated upward, meaning experiencing transcendence. So the animal soul too is affected by this process, and it too experiences transcendence. But who? Now you'll see this is the Mitteler Rebbe's classic style. There's going to be a lot of repetition, seemingly. The Mitteler Rebbe's style is that he elaborates, and he goes over something and says it several different times, maybe a different language. So just get used to that. It's just the Mitteler Rebbe's style. So he says, "V'hu shegam seichel anushi," and that is that also the seichel anushi, the natural intelligence, the natural human intelligence, shebemoyach gashmi, in the physical brain, physical mind, yakir v'yovin, will recognize and understand and comprehend, but emek hadas, with the depth of perception, with the depth of das, lahavchina emes mamish, to recognize and distinguish the absolute truth. That life is not self-contained, all about me and my needs, but the truth is the achdus pshuta of transcendence that the Ruach HaAdam of the Nefesh Halikis is introducing here. Mitam hanal, now he repeats the same parentheses he said before, for the above mentioned reason, the kamei ein hester v'helam klal. Here he says kamei, clear. Because before him, he said before, remember that chashech keira, there's no helam v'hester, or hester v'helam, there's no cover up and there's no concealment at all. The gam ruach habehema tala lamayla keruach ha'adam, and now the animal soul spirit will elevate and go upward like the spirit keruach, or the breath of the adam. Ba'atzmi pnei sheir shebemarkava. And where does it elevate to? To its source. You may recall when we talked about Birchas Yetzer with the Malachim, he explained that the Nefesh Habam is below. A behema comes from the behema above, which is the pnei sheir shebemarkava. In the Merkava, the chariot, it's also an animal. It's not a physical animal. It's a spiritual archetype, or counterpart, if you wish. Ruach sheir shebemarkava u'kamoi pores shenosu es ha'oren. Like we find in Tanakh, in Nach, we find that when they carried the Aron, the ark, the Poris, carried it by itself. They were able to carry the Aron. Why? Because they were aligned to Ratzon Hashem. So you could have the part of the animal following its own desires. But the Merkava is a Merkava. Merkava is a chariot that follows and leads and is completely bottled to the one riding in the chariot. The Gamla Maila Yeser, and even higher than the Merkava. Hari, like it says, he's bringing out proof for that. Hari Omar, Adam and Behema is Teshia Hashem. That Adam and Behema, Teshia Hashem. They go both together in the Yeshua, in the salvation, the divine salvation. Shezeu b'chinas ma uban. Adam and Behema, Adam is gematria ma. Behema is gematria ban. So it's the two names, two divine names. Now in their root, they express their divine power. Ma uban, that's Silas Shalamayla, which is higher than the Merkava, which is usually Bria or Yetzirah. So he's showing here how the Nefesh Abamis now is elevating, first to its root in Bria or Yetzirah in the Merkava, and then all the way Adam Behema, Ma'uban, two names of Hashem. One is a name that will evolve into Adam, that Ruach Adam El Lamayla, the Nefesh Alikis, and the other will evolve into Nefesh Abamis, Ruach HaBehema, Ban, that Yeredes Lamata. Through Aveda, we elevate the animal soul to elevate together with the divine soul. I'll stop for a moment if any questions before I continue. It's all the middle of this topic. We have to also figure out the parentheses are a little confusing with the Mitteler Rebbe. A lot of manuscripts don't always know where the parentheses begins and ends. I try to add the ones that made sense to me, but there may be some loose ones. Any questions so far? So now he's already discussing a little more in detail where the animal soul elevates to. And he explains, the Ruach HaAdam Lamayla, Keruach HaAdam Lamata. So just like we see the human being below, we walk upright, which means, unlike an animal that walks on all four, and its face, and therefore its breath is going downward, a human being was created to walk upright, and our breath goes upward. This is not just physiological, it also reflects on our spiritual makeup, our psychological makeup. An animal is not asked to do anything that's transcendent. Animals live in the same habitats and in the same environments, and didn't develop any technology. They don't look to improve their lives. They look to serve God in the way God set them up. It's pure existence, their existence and survival. In the Nefesh Abamis, it takes on another element that it's about self-preservation, self-interest. Ruach HaAdam, on the other hand, the Nefesh Alikis, is like a flame that's always reaching upward to connect to Hashem. That's why the Nefesh Alikis is restless and transcendent. Now we want the Ruach HaAdam to affect the Ruach HaBehema within us. So he's explaining now that the Ruach HaAdam Lamata, the Ruach HaAdam Lamayla, I should say, the root of Ruach HaAdam, which creates the human being in that way, is Ruach HaAdam Lamata, She'ela Lamayla Bebitla Yesh La'ayin. What is its significance? That it is constantly seeking and aspiring to become a state of bittul from yesh to ayin. The nefesh abamis on its own is a yesh. It's not seeking to connect to the ayin until we say Shema and we contemplate. The nefesh alikis begins to influence the nefesh abamis. But the nefesh alikis naturally, just like a person looks up and we breathe, our breath goes upward. The ruach ha'adam lamayla is the same thing. Its natural inclination is to look up, meaning to seek out higher levels of the divine. That's what the Nefesh Alikis is about. Bitla yesh la'ayin. V'hainu, b'chinas ma, that's why it's called ma. Ma is bitl. The chachma, the Adam Elyon, the Atzilus. This is the level of ma, of chachma, of the Adam Elyon, of the supernal man, meaning the structure of man in Atzilus. Ub'chinas ha-malchus. Oh, stop. Comma or period. So that's Ruach HaAdam. What's Ruach HaBehema? So he says, Ubchinas HaMalchus Kishiredes Lamata. Level of Malchus, in contrast to Chochmah. Chochmah, as we know, is Koyach Ma, Chochmah, and it's always absorbing and bottled to Keser, to that which is to the supraconscious. That's the idea of Chochmah. Chochmah, like he says in Tanya, chapter 35 in the Haggadah, it senses a higher reality than itself. Malchus, on the other hand, when it descends below, lahachyis ruach shvolim, to sustain ruach shvolim, the spirit of the downtrodden, meaning it's Malchus that's going downward. That's the purpose of Malchus. So that, hu b'chinas ban, gematri behema. That's why the ruach yeredes lamata. Because if Malchus was going upward, it wouldn't create existence. Malchus, which carries all of Atzilus, but in a diminished form, its role is to enter into Biyah and create an independent reality, independent consciousness. Very opposite than Chochmah Koyach, a Ruach HaAdam. So therefore, Malchus refers to the level of Ban, Gematri Behema, Benikra Behema Rabba. Some places it's called the great or powerful animal. The Revia al Elef Turim. So the expression there is a Behema Rabba, a great animal that Revia, that leaps over 1,000 mountains. It's an expression in, I think it's in Shirashirim, or is it in a different place? Or I'm not sure where it is. I think it's a verse in Nach.
No, it's not in Tanakh.
Are you sure?
The Real Elef Turin, I think not.
The Shosislon. Okay, we can look it up. If someone can look it up, we can find the source. But it's an expression that's referring to this behema. V'shosislon, what does that mean? And shos is from the word like shisia, like a foundation, or holds it up, maybe.
Drinking.
From the word shisia, I thought of that, but maybe. I have to look it up.
Maybe
I
getting
actually
the
looked
nourishment from that.
Maybe. Okay, so that's now another level, ban, behema. The im kol zeh. And nevertheless, with all of this, b'china shem ban eila l'mayla. Through the Aveda that we're talking about, the point is to get shem ban, not to go down, but to come back up, to elevate upwards. B'atzilus, in Atzilus, ayidei ruach ha'odam b'chinas ma. Through the spirit, ruach ha'odam b'chinas ma, kamei reichev al kruv kal. So another Maimer Chazal, like the one that rides on a very light kruv is a cherub, like the kruvim on the Oren. So it's referring to a malach. So in other words, it's like the behema is leading the chariot, but who rides on it and who directs it? It's the Adam. So it's the Adam guiding and elevating the animal upward. So it's like when you're riding on a horse. So if you're guiding the horse is going where you want it to go, not where it wants to go. So the Ruach HaBehema on its own goes where it wants to go, once it becomes independent. I'm not talking about Malchus, I'm talking about in lower levels. But the Adam is Mevarer the Behema, or Shema is Mevarer Shem Ban, causing it to elevate. Ukamoy HaMerkavah the Malchus, Sheneses Esakise. Like the Merkavah, the chariot of Malchus that carries the throne, Vidal. So this is a long parenthesis that started from Mitam Hanal. Okay, I'm just going to continue reading because it's one flow. It's a little, Mitteler Rebbe's language again is a little difficult at times, but I think we got the point. Another parenthesis. Like was explained earlier, so we discussed that the nefesh alikis manifests and encloses itself in the animal soul. This I referred to earlier, and this is the Rebbe Rashab actually cites this expression. They become like one muhus, one personality. Ad she'enig v'tzar haruchnis delikus, to the extent that the pleasure and pain, spiritual pleasure and pain, of the spiritual and godly pleasure and pain of the nefesh alikis to spoil the targish gama nefesh abamis belay bosar. Affects and is felt by the nefesh abamis in its very physical flesh, like we learned earlier. That like he said, Psura Teva, for example, on the good side, when he heard a good piece of news, it actually physically affected his whole body, that it swelled. Tadash and Etzem. The same thing in the negative side. So we learned that earlier, and he's bringing that as an example here. Like it is when he's bitter or pain or in pain, sad, or bechedva, simcha, joy. Even though the nefesh alikis is completely negates any physical definition, the loit is spoiled mimikri haguf, and it's not affected but it's not affected by the experiences of the body klal at all.
You skipped a line.
Oh, you're right. Okay, sorry. Yeah, and the same thing with Ava V'yira, Kamesha Kosa, V'hafta B'chol Avavcha B'shnei Yitzarecha, B'leiv Bosar Dafke. So there again we see that Avos Hashem, which is a ruchniistic thing, actually affects B'chol Avavcha, both sides of the heart, also the physical side of the physical flesh, the heart of flesh. Right. So he's talking here that all this shows that they have a relationship with one another. V'chein b'ispalos ha-nefesh habamis. So just like the nefesh habamis is affected by the nefesh alikis, the same thing the other way around. The stimulation or the excitement of the animal soul, targish ha-nefesh alikis. The divine soul feels it. Afal pisha mishlos b'chol teir geshem. Even though we also learned that the nefesh alikis be'etzem completely negates any physical definition, and is not affected by the experience of the body. But remember, he said there were two levels. The nefesh alikis, the way it's lamayla mislapshus b'guf, is taka not affected. But then there's a level that is affected. So this is what he's referring to. Kachu lamayla. So just like it is below, that the nefesh alikis and nefesh habamis affect one another, even though be'etzem, the nefesh alikis is beyond the nefesh habamis. Same to lamayla. Remember, we said the adam lamata is like the adam lamayla is like the adam lamata. So the same thing lamayla b'chinas ma'o ban. That what? The mashired is I think this should be hamalchus. That when malchus descends lamata mata, meaning in shem ban, kumoy bebehemes v'chayis di yitzira. Here he clearly says it's yitzira. Like the animals, the animals and the cattle and the animals of Yitzira. Ad klipas neged asiya. And it descends all the way into klipas neged of asiya in the world of asiya. Zeu kedimyan ha-nefesh habamis. That's like the animal soul. The odom of the person. V'tizbar gam hi. V'sala lamayla. And it too can be refined and elevated above. Ba'aliyah deruach ha'adam da'atzilus. So in other words, the nefesh alikis comes down and manifests in the animal soul, and they affect each other. The truth is, the nefesh alikis in its root is higher than that, but they do affect each other. And that's why, as we learned earlier, the nefesh alikis can affect the nefesh habamis to also elevate with it, because they become like one muhus. So when the nefesh alikis is contemplating on Shema, the nefesh habamis is doing it together with the nefesh alikis. It's not two separate experiences. And that's why it has the ability to elevate it. Just like the nefesh alikis manifests in nefesh habamis, so too when the ma manifests in ban to the point that it can elevate it. And the reason for this is, like we learned, that we talked about Kel Deus Havaya, because he contains both Deus, both perceptions, both perspectives. Al kain v'loy niskanu alilis. V'loy. That's why loy with a vav and loy with an aleph. He manifests within it with all the the alilas are all the affairs of the world. The loy, he's beyond it. As he is within it, he's beyond it. And both of them join together, as we learned at length, both the Mitteler Rebbe's Maimer and the Rebbe Rashab. He's bringing together many ideas here that we learned earlier. And if I need to explain more, I will. But we've learned it at length. So bottom line, he's right away going back to the two perspectives. And they're both one, because the Tzimtzum does not conceal from Hashem's point of view, so they become one. Now the Nefesh Elikis, as it manifests the Nefesh Habamis, when it draws down the divine energy of Shema Yisrael, and Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and explains it in the language the Nefesh Habamis can understand, it's invoking and bringing this power to unite both perspectives and elevate that, what he said, Adamu Behema says Shia Hashem, together. Not just to the level of Bria, but all the way in Atzilus. Okay.
He said, Beis Deis ke'echod. You didn't say the ke'echod. It's not only he tolerate 2 days. It's like the same.
Yeah, of course. I didn't say the word ke'echod, so I missed it. But yes, as one.
Beis Deis ke'echod.
Yeah.
So the mechanism, so that's how that's how our soul is able to, through the avoda here, go higher when it goes back. Is that what
the soul saying? Or the animal soul? What are you referring to?
I'm talking about the Nefesh Elokis, because
Nefesh Elokis is divine in the first place. We're talking about even the animal soul.
But I'm saying it can go higher once it merges with the.
It doesn't discuss that here.
Oh, okay. And also you said, I'm sorry.
Here he's discussing the effect on the animal soul. The divine soul has its own aliyah. We talked about that separately, but that's not what he's saying here.
Okay. But also you said that it's the circumcision of the heart is actually physical too. Is that right? Or is that just metaphoric? He
didn't quote that. You're bringing a verse from another place.
All right. I thought I heard you say that. I'm sorry, Rabbi. All right.
I'm talking about circumcision here. It's discussed elsewhere in context, but he didn't mention that here. He said the flesh of the heart, that it affects the very flesh, the very physical heart and emotions of a person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you explain this velo with a vav and velo with an aleph? I have a hard time always understanding that.
If you go back to Ayin Beis, volume 3, it's explained right here on page 1474. I believe. Let me just make sure. What was the 2 pages before? 1 second.
What does niskanu mean?
Yeah, it's on page 1472. Sorry, 1472. Okay. So this was, what I'm saying now has been discussed pretty much at length.
I know.
I have no problem summarizing it. I'll just tell you what it said, what we learned.
Thank you.
I'm referring you to the pages. On 1472, and the following pages, he discussed it. The Mitteler Rebbe discussed it at length when we learned the Maimer. If you remember, we learned the 70-plus page Maimer.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, the Pasuk Kel Deus Havaya, that God has both perspectives, Das Elyon and Das Tachten. The verse continues, V'loi niskenu aliles. And to him, so Loi is written with a Vav. I'm sorry, it's written with an Aleph, but it's it's pronounced with a Vav, because V'loi can be read either way. So V'loi niskenu aliles with a Vav means to him are all the affairs of the world, meaning he knows it all. He is all-knowing, Deus Hashem, Das Elyon and Das Tachten, and all the affairs of the world he controls, so to speak. If you say V'loi with an Aleph, it means he's beyond all affairs of the world. V'loi, all affairs of the world, he's beyond it. So which one is it? The answer is that from God's point of view, he's both beyond it and within it. From our point of view, there's two different Das Elyon, Das Tachten, Yechud Eloi, Yechud Tata. That's the bottom line. That we want to introduce, even where we do see a distinction, should come to appreciate that God is both within and without, meaning within and beyond.
Thank you very much.
That's in brief the Nakuda here. So it's a combination of full unity between Dasai and Das Tachni Yechudi Lo Yechudi Tata. And this context, it affects the animal soul as well. Okay. So let me see here if I'll stop here or let me continue. Let me see. So I just finished page 5. I lost the place here. 1 second, please. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile stopping here, simply because there's a lot, and I'd rather go slower than faster, to be honest. So all this, just to sum up, is the Mitteler Rebbe explaining what the hisbonenus of Shema. Remember, Ayin Beis stops at the hisbonenus. It doesn't continue what effect it has on the animal soul. The Mitteler Rebbe does explain that, based on the Alter Rebbe, which we'll soon read, the Alter Rebbe's more summarized language of this idea. So we can clearly extrapolate from here what the Rebbe Rashab would have most likely answered or continued discussing from the conclusion, which is the whole point of this exercise. So we are now at the end of page 5 in my summary, in my essay, I should say, called Siyam Hemshech Terav, and I'm going to stop here. With any questions, further questions, or other questions? So I'm stopping literally at the last word, Vizehu. We'll do that in the next class.
I think one of the main things that the Nefesh Abamis could come to this understanding because they are united ke'echad, the Nefesh Elikis and the Nefesh Abamis.
That's one key element, absolutely. But there's other factors, like you said. There's the factor that Nefesh Elikis retains its awareness of the divine beyond existence. There's the fact that what else? Yeah, all the different factors he's brought here. Yeah, they all combine together with a dynamic. He's giving us the real dynamics, what makes it work, the mechanics of bringing bittul. Remember, he has to answer the question: how could a nefesh abamis that initially is completely opposed to the nefesh elikis, how could it be affected? So all this is part of the process. Yeah.
Right. He's saying that even the Nefesh Abamis deep inside knows the truth.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that it knows deep inside. It says when it hears it, it recognizes the truth. He didn't say that language. You just said is an addition that he did not say. It may be true, but he didn't say the Nefesh Habamis really knows it and the Nefesh Elikis is revealing it. He just said the Nefesh Habamis is now Makiras Emes, the true Emes. You could say because the Nefesh Habamis is rooted in the Merkava and the highest levels, and perhaps, and it's true.
Yeah.
But I was very careful because I was looking if he's going to say something like that. So again,
said,
I'm not saying it's wrong. After the Nefesh Elikis teaches it. Who said before? Okay.
Rabbi Eliezer Gold sends his regards to you and the class from 38,000 feet in the air flying back from Israel.
Okay. We welcome him back.
He was asking me where are we holding right now in the WhatsApp chat. So
you could tell him we're on page 5, end of page 5 of the summary that he wanted, the essay that I wrote.
Yeah, that's exactly what I told him.
Good.
Maybe he's in the level of the law in Niskenu Alilis with the Aleph, which is above.
Shkoyach. I should tell him that too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember an ad when the World Trade Center opened up in New York in the early 70s, 71, I think. So, it was the tallest building at the time. And they had Windows of the World, a restaurant on top of on the rooftop. Beautiful views and so on. So I remember an ad in the newspaper. I found it to be very cute, and it remained with me. I think I wrote an article about it at one point, after the unfortunately 9/11. It was a bird's eye view, like an aerial view of the roof of the World Trade Center. And it said, the closest some of us will ever get to heaven.
Very
I
good.
found it to be very a nice twist. It resonated. I'm not saying that about Eliezer Gold, God forbid.
No, that's why we're learning, so we can rise above that level.
He didn't learn Ayin Beis.
Okay, so Yitzchak posted here from me, Behema Revia al El Alfi Turi V'Shoshislon, an animal that rests upon a Revia, he says rests. Yeah, like Aryeh Revia. Usually, Revia al Mizbeach, it means like the fire. Okay.
No, Revia means lays down.
Okay, so an animal that lays or rests upon 1,000 mountains and sustains them. You're right, v'shosis. But shosis, I think, also from shesiya, like a foundation, it sustains them. It could be v'shosis lon. It sustains them. That's how it's translated here. It's in Zoyar Chelik Aleph Yud Ches Beis. We're so amazed by your Bekias, Yitzchak.
Thank you. Well, multitasking is harder.
Yeah. Okay, good.
ADD.
So we'll stop here. Okay, at the end of the page 5 in my essay, let me stop the recording.